The rain came down in sheets over Manhattan, painting the glass towers in streaks of silver and gray. Inside the Celestine Grand Hotel, the top-floor restaurant glowed like a lantern suspended above the city, all gold chandeliers, quiet jazz, and hushed conversations between the world's most powerful men. At the far end of the room, a long table dominated the center under a chandelier that dripped light like molten glass. Around it sat 6 of Asia's most influential investors, men whose signatures could shift markets, whose decisions shaped economies. And at the head of that table sat Adrian Lau, the 34-year-old billionaire CEO of Lau Global Logistics, a man whose name was whispered with awe and resentment in equal measure. Adrian had the kind of face that drew attention even when he wasn't trying. Sharply defined jaw, dark eyes that rarely betrayed emotion, a posture that spoke of absolute control. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit from Savile Row, cufflinks engraved with his initials, and a watch that gleamed with quiet power. People often said he was born with money, but the truth was far harsher. He built his empire from scraps left behind by his father's failures. Every contract he signed, every deal he closed, carried that invisible weight of revenge and redemption. Tonight was supposed to be the crowning jewel, a multi-billion-dollar trade alliance connecting shipping routes across Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, and Singapore. Everything had to go perfectly. But it wasn't. Across the table, one of the Japanese delegates frowned as the interpreter spoke. Something in the tone didn't match. Adrian noticed it immediately, the faint tightening of the delegate's jaw, the polite but distant nod. He glanced at the interpreter, who was struggling to convey a complex phrase about logistics tariffs. The translation was off by one crucial nuance. Adrian clenched his jaw. That single misstep could sour the entire negotiation. "No," he said sharply, interrupting. "That's not what I said." The room fell silent. The interpreter blanched. The investors exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian exhaled through his nose, forcing calm. He prided himself on control, but this evening had been a chain of small irritations, late arrivals, technical malfunctions, now this. He needed precision, and the one thing he hated more than arrogance was incompetence. At the edge of the room, a waitress carrying a tray of tea paused. She was small, barely noticeable among the sea of tailored suits and designer dresses, black uniform, hair neatly tied back, face half hidden by modesty. Her name tag read Mei Lin. She had been serving quietly all evening, her movements careful and efficient. To everyone else, she was invisible. But at that moment, something about the mistranslated phrase made her flinch. It was wrong, not just grammatically, but culturally. It turned Adrian's polite offer of partnership into something that sounded like dominance. She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she set down a cup. The investors were murmuring, their confusion growing. Adrian noticed her movement, his sharp eyes catching every detail. "What is it?" he demanded before he could stop himself. May froze. She stammered. All eyes turned to her. The interpreter looked offended, and Adrian's tone hardened. "You were about to say something. Speak." Her voice came out soft but steady. "Your phrase, it wasn't translated correctly. You said you wanted mutual expansion, not strategic control. The word used, it changes the meaning entirely." The interpreter turned red. "Excuse me, but I am fluent." Mei Lin continued, switching effortlessly into Japanese, repeating the sentence in perfect syntax and tone. The delegates blinked in surprise. Her accent was flawless, not learned, but lived. Then, just as calmly, she translated the Korean segment, then Mandarin, then Tagalog for the Singaporean assistant who had been struggling to follow. The entire table fell silent as her words flowed like water, seamless, natural, and precise. When she finished, she bowed her head slightly. "Forgive me. I just thought clarity was important." The Japanese investor's face broke into a rare smile. "Very important," he said, nodding to Adrian. "Now we understand each other." For the first time in years, Adrian Lau found himself speechless. The interpreter quickly excused himself, flustered and humiliated, while the rest of the meeting proceeded with an ease that hadn't existed before. Mei Lin returned to her quiet work, keeping her gaze low, avoiding the billionaire's burning stare. But Adrian couldn't stop watching her, the way she moved, the calm confidence behind her silence. Who was this woman? How could a waitress speak 6 languages fluently? He felt a rare emotion stir inside him, not irritation, not attraction yet, but curiosity. And for a man like Adrian Lau, curiosity was dangerous. By the time the dinner ended, the investors were satisfied. The deal had been salvaged. Adrian's assistant approached him with a tablet showing the updated terms. Everything was back on track, except his thoughts. His mind kept circling back to the girl with the soft voice and impossible fluency. As he rose from his chair, he saw her again, clearing plates at the edge of the room. Something made him stop. The other servers bowed as he passed, but Mei Lin kept working, unaware he was watching. Or pretending not to be aware. He found that he didn't like being ignored. "Wait," he said. She froze again, glancing up. "Yes, sir." "Come here." The manager, alarmed, hurried forward. "Mr. Lau, I hope there wasn't any issue." "No issue," Adrian said evenly, his eyes never leaving Mei. "Just curiosity." The manager stepped back uncertainly. Mei approached, hands clasped in front of her. Up close, Adrian saw that she wasn't just quiet, she was deliberate. Her eyes were dark and intelligent, her voice gentle but certain. "You speak Japanese?" he asked. She nodded. "And Mandarin, Korean, Thai, Tagalog, Hindi, and English." His brows lifted. "All fluently?" "Fluently enough to survive," she replied softly. He studied her. There was no arrogance in her tone, no need to impress. Just truth. "How does a waitress learn 6 languages?" She hesitated before answering. "By listening." It wasn't the answer he expected. Something in it made him feel seen in a way he didn't like. He dismissed her with a nod, but as he left the restaurant, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall, and saw that he was smiling. He hadn't done that in years. The night didn't end there. Hours later, as Mei Lin clocked out, she found herself lingering by the staff entrance. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, the city glittering in reflections. She pulled her worn coat tighter and started down the street when a sleek black car glided to a stop beside her. The tinted window lowered, revealing Adrian Lau himself. For a moment, neither spoke. The contrast between them was absurd, his world of privilege, her world of survival. "Get in," he said simply. She froze. "Excuse me. It's raining. I'll drive you home." "That's not necessary, sir. I insist." His tone left no room for argument, but she still shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm used to walking." She turned away before he could reply. The door remained open for a moment before closing slowly. Adrian watched her through the glass as she disappeared into the mist, umbrella held high, her small frame swallowed by the city. For some reason, he couldn't drive away immediately. That night, he sat in his penthouse office overlooking the skyline, replaying her voice in his mind. There was something in it, an intelligence that wasn't learned in classrooms, a humility that defied logic. He found himself searching her name through the hotel's staffing records, discovering almost nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no social media, no digital footprint. It was as if she didn't exist. And that unsettled him. Meanwhile, in a small apartment above a noodle shop in Chinatown, Mei Lin opened her worn notebook and began translating a children's story into 4 languages for the kids she tutored on weekends. Her brother coughed softly from the other room, and she smiled faintly. The world outside had no idea who she really was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Back at his desk, Adrian Lau stared at the city lights until dawn. Somewhere below, a waitress who spoke every Asian language had just changed his entire perception of intelligence, humility, and power, without even trying. And for the first time in a long, long while, the man who controlled empires found himself desperate to understand someone who owned nothing at all. The following morning, New York awoke under a pale winter sun, but Adrian Lau hadn't slept. He had spent the night replaying the waitress's voice in his head, her effortless command of tone and meaning. He couldn't remember the last time someone had defied his expectations so completely. Every person around him, board members, investors, assistants, spoke to him with rehearsed politeness. She hadn't. She'd simply spoken the truth and disappeared into the rain. That quiet authenticity gnawed at him, refusing to fade. By 8 a.m., Adrian's assistant, Marcus, entered the penthouse office, tablet in hand. Your schedule for the day, sir, board meeting at 10, investor call at noon, and, he paused, frowning. I also received a message from Celestine Grand. Something about a staff incident? Adrian glanced up sharply. Incident? Marcus scrolled. Apparently, the interpreter from last night filed a formal complaint against one of the waitresses. Claimed she disrupted a closed meeting. Adrian leaned back in his chair, the faintest curve touching his lips. Did he now? Yes, sir. The hotel manager's asking how you'd like it handled. Dismiss the complaint. Marcus blinked. Sir. Tell them she didn't disrupt anything. She saved the deal. Marcus hesitated, unsure he'd heard correctly. Adrian Lau wasn't known for defending anyone, let alone a waitress. Understood, sir. Adrian's gaze returned to the skyline. And find out everything you can about her. Mei Lin. Marcus nodded and left. But hours later, when he returned with a report, Adrian's expression tightened. You said she's been at the hotel for 8 months. Yes, sir. Before that, nothing verifiable. No college transcripts, no social records. Her file starts the day she was hired. Adrian drummed his fingers on the desk. No online footprint. None. It's almost like she doesn't exist. He sat back, intrigued. Most people wanted to be seen, to leave traces of themselves everywhere. But this woman had chosen invisibility, and somehow, that made her unforgettable. Later that afternoon, the rain returned. At the Celestine Grand, Mei Lin wiped down the counter near the espresso bar, her movements slow, precise. She'd felt the weight of the previous night all day. The look on the billionaire's face had unsettled her more than his words. She hadn't meant to draw attention to herself. The last thing she wanted was recognition. But when truth slipped out, it refused to be contained. Her manager approached nervously. May, Mr. Lau's office called. Her heart stilled. What did they say? He requested to meet you, personally. She froze. Why? The manager shrugged. Didn't say. He's sending a car. She wanted to protest, but before she could, the sleek black limousine from the night before pulled up outside the glass doors. Other employees peeked from behind the counters, whispering. Mei Lin's stomach twisted. The last thing she needed was attention, especially from someone like Adrian Lau. When she stepped outside, the driver opened the door silently. Inside, Adrian sat waiting, phone in hand, posture immaculate. He looked every bit the man who controlled empires, and every bit the man who couldn't be defied. Miss Lin, he greeted as she slid in, her hands clasped in her lap. Mr. Lau. He regarded her for a long moment, then said simply, I owe you my thanks. You corrected a multi-million-dollar mistake. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I just spoke up. That's not what most people do in a room like that. I'm not most people. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, admiration, maybe both. Clearly. The car glided through the city streets. For a while, silence filled the space between them, broken only by the hum of tires on wet asphalt. Finally, he spoke. I'm holding a regional summit tomorrow. Representatives from half of Asia's markets will be attending. I need someone I can trust to ensure our translations are precise. May frowned. You already have interpreters. Yes. The same ones who almost ruined a contract. You want me to work for you? I want you to assist me, he corrected smoothly. For one day. She hesitated. I can't. I have shifts. And classes. His gaze sharpened. Classes. Evening linguistics, Columbia Extension Program, she admitted reluctantly. His lips curved faintly. So, you're not just fluent. You're still learning. Languages never end, she said quietly. They evolve. Like people. Her answer caught him off guard. He'd expected compliance or fear, not philosophy. You'd be compensated generously. It's not about money. He leaned forward slightly. Then what is it about? She looked out the window. Peace. He almost laughed. Peace. In New York. In myself, she replied. That's the only kind that lasts. He fell silent, uncharacteristically uncertain. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not shareholders, not competitors, not even friends. It was as if she was fluent not just in languages, but in truths people avoided. When the car stopped outside her apartment building, she turned to him. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Lau. But I can't accept. He studied her. Why not? Because working for powerful people always costs more than it pays. For a moment, their eyes locked, two worlds colliding in quiet defiance. Then she stepped out and disappeared into the drizzle, leaving Adrian staring after her, his jaw tense. No one refused him. No one ever had. That night, in his penthouse, Adrian paced. Logic told him to forget her, she was a distraction, nothing more. But logic was losing the fight. He poured himself a drink, trying to focus on his upcoming summit. The Japanese investors wanted revisions, the Korean partners were stalling, and now this waitress, no, this linguist, was living rent-free in his thoughts. He set the glass down, frustrated. She said no, he muttered. So why does it matter? Because she didn't say it to hurt your pride, a quieter part of his mind whispered. She said it because she meant it. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then called Marcus. Send an invitation to Miss Mei Lin. Have it delivered personally. Tell her she'll be compensated double her daily rate. And include my card. Marcus hesitated. Sir, if she refuses again? Then offer her triple. I don't take no for an answer. Across the city, Mei sat at her small wooden table, her notebook open, a candle flickering beside it. Her younger brother, Wei, sat across from her, working on his homework. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. When someone knocked on the door, she startled. A man in a dark suit stood outside, holding an envelope. Delivery for Miss Lin. From Mr. Adrian Lau. She accepted it reluctantly. Inside was an embossed invitation to the Global Logistics Summit, her name printed elegantly in gold. At the bottom, a handwritten note, I value precision. Join me for one day. The choice is yours. Beneath it was a business card embossed with the Lau Global insignia. Wei looked up from his papers. Who's Adrian Lau? She smiled faintly. Someone who doesn't understand the word no. Are you going to work for him? She hesitated. Maybe just once. He grinned. Then make sure he pays for dinner too. She laughed softly, but her chest felt tight. Something told her this wasn't just another temporary job. Something about that man, his eyes, his tone, it all hinted at a storm she wasn't ready for. The next morning, the sky was clear but sharp with cold. At the Grand Summit Hall, journalists gathered, cameras flashing. Adrian arrived surrounded by security, his presence commanding instant silence. He moved through the crowd like a storm contained in human form. Every detail of the event reflected his perfectionism, timing, lighting, even the color of the floral arrangements. At exactly 9:30, Mei Lin entered through a side entrance, her hair neatly tied, wearing a simple navy dress. She looked out of place among the tailored suits, yet somehow more composed than anyone else in the room. Marcus met her halfway. Mr. Lau asked me to escort you. Inside, Adrian was reviewing his notes when Marcus announced her arrival. He turned, and for a brief moment, the mask of control slipped. She looked different in the daylight, confident but unpretentious. You came, he said quietly. She nodded. For one day. He smiled faintly. That's all I need. They began the morning session. Mei Lin stood discreetly beside the delegates, listening, interpreting whenever necessary. Adrian quickly noticed that her presence changed everything. Conversations flowed smoother, cultural misunderstandings vanished before they could form, and tension eased among the participants. Even the most rigid investors began to smile when she translated. Her voice had that rare quality, soft yet authoritative, the kind that disarmed egos without confrontation. By midday, the conference had become a symphony of collaboration. Adrian watched her between discussions, realizing that her mere presence altered the energy in the room. She wasn't commanding attention, she was harmonizing it. For the first time in his career, he felt peace in a boardroom. When the final session ended, the delegates stood and applauded. One of them, a Korean CEO, turned to Adrian. You should keep her. She makes business feel human again. After the applause faded, Adrian approached her. You handled yourself perfectly. Mei Lin bowed slightly. It's what I do. I think it's more than that, he said. You didn't just translate words, you translated intent. That's rare. She shrugged. Most people listen to respond. I listen to understand. Her words lingered like a melody he couldn't forget. He wanted to ask more, to understand what shaped someone like her. But before he could, she gathered her things and said softly, my shift at the diner starts in an hour. He frowned. You still work there? I promised I'd cover for someone. After this? He gestured to the grandeur around them. You could name your price anywhere. She smiled gently. Peace of mind doesn't come with a paycheck. Then she was gone, leaving him surrounded by luxury yet feeling strangely empty. Adrian Lau, the man who conquered markets, had just lost his first negotiation, and he didn't even know what he was trying to win. The following week blurred into a whirlwind of meetings and travel for Adrian Lau, yet nothing seemed to command his full attention anymore. Even as he flew between boardrooms and private jets, his thoughts circled back to a quiet voice translating between worlds, a voice that carried honesty where ambition usually lived. Every language she spoke had its own cadence, its own melody, but somehow her presence had made them all sound like truth. He had met countless brilliant people, economists, linguists, diplomats, but no one who made understanding feel sacred. Adrian's assistant, Marcus, noticed the distraction. During a flight to Seoul, he glanced over from across the cabin. You've been staring at that file for 20 minutes, sir. It's blank. Adrian blinked, realizing he had opened a new document without typing a word. Leave it, he muttered, closing the laptop. He leaned back, looking out over the clouds. The reflection of the cabin lights mirrored against the dark window, and for a fleeting second, he saw her face instead, the calm focus, the gentleness beneath restraint. When they landed, the first thing Adrian did wasn't to call his investors. It was to send Marcus a simple instruction, find out if she's still working at the diner. By that evening, Marcus reported back. Yes, sir. She's still there. Evening shifts, weekends, sometimes doubles. Lives in Chinatown. Small apartment, no car, no known relatives except a younger brother. Adrian didn't know why that last part unsettled him. Send her a message. I want to see her again. She's refused 2 offers already. Then don't offer. Invite. That weekend, Mei Lin was helping a tourist couple at the diner, explaining the difference between 2 noodle broths in perfect Cantonese, when she noticed a familiar figure outside the rain-fogged window. The reflection of tailored gray fabric, a sleek car waiting at the curb, and that unmistakable composure, Adrian Lau. She sighed quietly. I'm on break, she told her coworker, slipping outside into the drizzle. Adrian was leaning against his car, the city's neon lights painting faint colors over his umbrella. You shouldn't keep showing up at people's workplaces, she said softly. Then stop working at all the places I go to, he replied, his tone smooth, teasing. You're everywhere I look lately. I think that says more about where you're looking. He smiled faintly. I was hoping we could talk. No job offers this time. Just coffee. I don't drink coffee. Tea, then. She hesitated. Her instinct told her to walk away, men like him didn't pursue conversations without an angle. But there was something curious in his voice, less arrogance, more patience. Against her better judgment, she nodded. They ended up in a quiet tea room tucked between 2 bookstores, the kind of place most billionaires never entered. Adrian looked oddly out of place among the mismatched cups and handwritten menu signs. Mei Lin, however, seemed to belong there, hands wrapped around a steaming cup, expression calm. For a while, silence filled the space. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was observant. You're not what I expected, Adrian finally said. She looked up. What did you expect? Someone with 6 languages, working a minimum wage job. I thought there'd be an explanation. There always is, she said quietly. Just not the kind that fits neatly into your spreadsheets. He smirked. Try me. She studied him for a moment. You know what the first word I learned in English was? He shook his head. Waitress. I thought it meant patience. Later, I realized it also meant invisibility. He frowned. You don't seem invisible to me. That's because you noticed, she said. Most people don't. Her words landed with the weight of something he didn't fully understand. For a man who had built his empire by being seen, the idea of choosing invisibility was foreign. Why keep working here, then? He asked. With your skill, you could work for the UN, embassies, global firms. I used to, she interrupted softly. He paused. Used to. She looked down at her tea. In Singapore. I was part of an international translation bureau. It was prestigious, lots of travel, lots of suits like yours. But one day, a refugee family came to our office. They didn't have the right documents, so the manager told us to turn them away. I stayed late and translated their plea anyway. 2 weeks later, I was dismissed for breaching confidentiality. Adrian exhaled slowly. And you didn't fight it? Fighting people with power doesn't change them, she said. It just drains you. So I left. Came here. Started over. Her voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath it. Adrian leaned forward. You traded prestige for peace. Peace and freedom, she corrected. No one can buy that. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe not. But it can be earned. Their eyes met across the table, his filled with curiosity, hers with quiet caution. It wasn't romance yet, but something deeper, recognition. Two people fluent in ambition, finally speaking honesty. The next day, Adrian cancelled a flight and sent Marcus ahead to Tokyo alone. He claimed exhaustion, but in truth, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl in the tea room. The way she spoke, the precision of her silence, it unsettled him more than any business failure ever could. By evening, he found himself standing outside the diner again. May was closing up, her apron folded neatly, her hair falling loose. She blinked in surprise when she saw him. You really don't give up, she said. I'm known for persistence. That's not always a compliment. He smiled slightly. Then let me turn it into one. There's a charity gala tomorrow for multilingual education programs. I'd like you to come. She frowned. Why me? Because you belong in rooms where languages matter. Or because you want to make a statement. He didn't deny it. Maybe both. She sighed. I don't own anything that fits a gala. Then I'll take care of it. She shot him a look. I said I'd think about it. Then think fast, he said, stepping back into the rain. I'll have a car waiting at 7. The next evening, she almost didn't go. The dress he sent was beautiful, simple navy silk that caught light like water, but wearing it felt like stepping into a world she didn't trust. Yet when she saw her reflection in the cracked mirror of her apartment, her brother watching with pride, she took a deep breath and whispered, just one night. When she arrived, the flash of cameras nearly blinded her. Adrian was waiting at the entrance, tall and poised, offering his arm. You made it, he said. I said I would. They entered together, and heads turned instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who was she? Why was Adrian Lau, the famously unattached CEO, bringing a waitress as his guest? He didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt grounded, real. As they walked among diplomats and investors, he noticed her posture, unfazed, calm, polite to everyone, whether billionaire or server. A Japanese ambassador approached and greeted Adrian, then addressed May in his native language. She responded fluently, bowing gracefully. Moments later, a Thai delegate joined, and she switched effortlessly again. Soon, people were gathering around her, fascinated by this quiet woman who made everyone feel understood. Adrian stood at a distance, watching her navigate the room not with power, but with empathy. Later, during dinner, a French businessman leaned over and said with amusement, "Where did you find her, Mr. Lau? She's more impressive than your merger." Adrian's lips twitched. I didn't find her. She corrected me. The man laughed, assuming it was a joke. Adrian didn't correct him. When the speeches began, May excused herself and stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered below, reflecting off her dress like fragments of language she'd once carried across borders. She hadn't meant to draw attention tonight. Yet she felt strangely at peace. "You disappear easily," came Adrian's voice behind her. She turned. "Old habit." He joined her, standing close but not too close. "You handled yourself well. You could do this professionally again. I told you, I'm done chasing approval." He studied her profile. "Then what are you chasing?" She smiled faintly. "Stillness." He leaned against the railing. "I envy that. I've spent my life chasing noise. You built an empire out of it. And lost myself in the process." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased. The hum of music and laughter faded. In that fragile silence, they both understood something unspoken, that connection didn't need translation. When he dropped her home that night, neither spoke during the drive. At her door, she hesitated before stepping out. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. He nodded. "You make me see things differently. Then maybe you're finally looking." She smiled faintly and disappeared inside. Back in the car, Adrian sat motionless, his chest tight in a way that felt unfamiliar. It wasn't lust. It wasn't infatuation. It was the quiet recognition that he had finally met someone he couldn't buy, command, or predict. Someone who spoke not just in languages, but in truths. And for a man who'd built his life on control, that was both terrifying and intoxicating. That night, May sat by her window, listening to the city's heartbeat through the glass. She didn't understand why this man, this powerful, untouchable man, had entered her orbit. But part of her knew she had changed something in him. And maybe, just maybe, he would change something in her too. Neither of them realized that their story had only just begun, and the next test would force them to translate not words, but hearts. The following week began with the same restless rhythm that had consumed Adrian Lau since the night of the gala. His empire hummed around him, emails, markets, boardrooms, but his thoughts kept drifting to the woman who had taught him more about humility in one evening than a lifetime of success ever had. He had faced competitors, critics, even scandals, but never had he faced someone whose silence could shake him to his core. He told himself it was curiosity. Professional interest. Maybe admiration. But late at night, when the city's pulse slowed and his penthouse lights glowed against the skyline, he couldn't escape the truth, it was longing. Meanwhile, Mei Lin tried to return to her normal life. The diner, the classes, the long nights tutoring children of immigrants, it was the only rhythm she trusted. Yet something had shifted. The memory of the gala clung to her like perfume, its warmth, its danger. She caught herself remembering the way Adrian had looked at her on that balcony, his voice soft, almost uncertain. That uncertainty had made him human. And humanity, she reminded herself, was fleeting in his world. One night, as she was leaving her class, a black car pulled up again. This time, she didn't flinch. "Still working late," Adrian said as the window slid down. "I could say the same to you," she replied. He smiled faintly. "I was nearby. Thought I'd offer a ride." She hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. But only if we stop for street food." He looked almost startled. "Street food? Don't tell me the billionaire doesn't eat dumplings from a cart." "Not recently." "Then tonight, you will." 15 minutes later, they stood beneath a flickering neon sign beside a crowded sidewalk vendor. Steam rose from bamboo baskets, carrying the scent of garlic and ginger into the cold night. Adrian watched as Mei Lin ordered confidently in Mandarin, the vendor grinning at her familiarity. When she handed him a pair of chopsticks, he hesitated, clearly out of his element. She smiled. "What's wrong? Afraid of germs?" "No," he said, awkwardly picking up a dumpling. "Afraid of looking ridiculous." She laughed softly. "Then you're in the right place. Everyone looks ridiculous when they try to fit in somewhere new." He tried a bite, burning his tongue in the process. She stifled a laugh as he cursed under his breath. "Careful," she teased. "Humility tastes better when it's cooled." He shot her a look, half annoyed, half amused. "You enjoy seeing me out of control, don't you?" "I enjoy seeing people real," she said simply. For the first time, Adrian laughed, genuine, unguarded. The sound startled even him. It felt like the first breath after years underwater. They walked along the river afterward, steam still rising from their cups of tea. You know, he said quietly, I built my company from nothing. Everyone assumes I inherited it. But the truth is, I inherited debt. My father gambled away everything we had. I started at 23 with a warehouse and a loan I couldn't afford. She glanced at him, surprised. And now? Now I own half the ships that cross the Pacific. And yet somehow, I feel emptier than I did back then. She stopped walking. Because you've mistaken motion for progress. He looked at her. Explain. You keep moving, expanding, building, but you never pause to ask why. You're fluent in success, Adrian, but not in peace. Her words struck deeper than she knew. For a moment, he had no reply. Then he said softly, you talk like someone twice your age. I've lived twice the life most people have, she said. In 6 countries, through wars of language and silence. You learn fast when words are the only armor you have. He studied her in the pale light, realizing how little he truly knew about her. What else are you not telling me? She smiled faintly. Everything that's none of your business. He laughed again, shaking his head. Fair enough. The next day, at his office, the tone of the world returned, calls, contracts, strategy sessions. But his mind drifted. Marcus noticed. Sir, the sole investors are pressing for a decision. Delay it 2 days. Marcus hesitated. You never delay anything. Adrian looked up. I am now. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had learned not to question his employer's moods. Still, whispers began to circulate. The media had caught wind of the gala. Photos of Adrian with Mei Lin had surfaced online, her in that navy dress beside him, the mysterious woman no one could identify. The tabloids called her the polyglot waitress. The speculation was relentless. When Mei Lin saw the headlines, her stomach dropped. Waitress stuns billionaire gala with 7 languages. She turned off her phone, mortified. The diner staff looked at her differently now, curious, jealous, some even cold. Her manager called her into the office. May, this attention, it's not good for the restaurant. I didn't ask for it, she said quietly. I know, but, maybe take some time off. She nodded, numb. Outside, rain began to fall again, heavy and gray. That evening, her phone buzzed. Adrian. She ignored it. Then again. Finally, she answered, her tone weary. Mr. Lau, please stop calling. Did you see the news? Yes. I'm handling it. My PR team will clear your name. I don't have a name to clear, she said sharply. But you just put mine where it never belonged. He exhaled, guilt flickering through his voice. I didn't plan for this. That's the problem, Adrian. You live in a world that plans everything, and still hurts everyone who doesn't. There was silence on the line. Then, softly, can we meet? She hesitated. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They met in a small rooftop garden atop one of his properties, a space usually reserved for private dinners. The city stretched out below, endless and glittering. May stood at the edge, arms crossed, hair damp from the rain. Adrian approached quietly, no suit jacket, just a simple shirt for once. I didn't mean for this to happen, he began. I know, she said. But meaning well doesn't undo consequences. He sighed. I'll issue a statement. Say you were hired professionally, nothing personal. She turned to face him. You don't get it. People will still see what they want. To them, I'm a story. To you, maybe a lesson. But I'm the one who has to live with both. He looked stricken. Tell me how to fix it. You can't. Her tone wasn't angry, just tired. You think words can fix everything, but sometimes silence is the only truth left. He stepped closer. You're angry with me. I'm disappointed, she said. I thought you saw me beyond the surface. But maybe that was just my mistake. He searched her eyes, desperate to explain what he didn't understand himself. I do see you. More than you know. You remind me what real looks like. Then start being it, she said, turning away. Not just saying it. He watched her leave through the rain, her silhouette fading into the mist. For the first time in years, Adrian Lau felt powerless, not against competitors, not against fate, but against himself. The next few days were chaos. The press wouldn't let go. Anonymous sources spun stories about an affair, about favoritism, about a hidden past. Reporters camped near the diner. May stopped going to work altogether. She stayed home, curtains drawn, her brother worried sick. When she finally checked her email, there were dozens of offers, TV interviews, brand deals, even scholarships. Each one felt like a trap. One afternoon, a letter arrived by hand. No logo, no address. Just her name written neatly. Inside was a single sheet, "You once said peace can't be bought. But I still want to help you find it. Adrian." Beneath it, a check. Blank. She tore it in half. Across the city, Adrian sat in a meeting he wasn't hearing. His mind was elsewhere. Marcus leaned toward him. "Sir, are you sure you want to go through with the Singapore merger? The terms are risky." Adrian blinked. "Do it." Understood. But he didn't understand. No one did. Adrian was unraveling in quiet ways, missing deadlines, ignoring calls, questioning everything he once believed. The empire he'd built on logic was bending under the weight of feeling. That evening, he left his office and walked, no driver, no entourage, just the hum of the city and the echo of his own footsteps. He found himself back at the diner, dark and closed. Through the window, he could see the reflection of empty tables, the ghost of laughter. He pressed his hand against the glass for a moment, then turned away. Days later, May returned to campus to attend a linguistics seminar. She thought she could disappear in the crowd, but halfway through the lecture, she noticed him at the back of the room. Adrian Lau, billionaire, sitting among students in a gray sweater, taking notes. Her heart skipped. After the lecture, she confronted him. "What are you doing here?" "Listening." "Why?" "Because I wanted to understand what you mean when you say languages evolve." She folded her arms. "You could have just read a book. I've read thousands. None of them made sense until you." Her expression softened despite herself. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" He smiled faintly. "Not when it matters." For a long moment, they stood there in the soft murmur of students leaving. Finally, she sighed. "If you really want to understand languages, Adrian, start with silence. It's where every truth begins." He nodded slowly. "Then teach me." She stared at him, searching his eyes for insincerity, but found none. Maybe he truly meant it. Maybe, just maybe, he was ready to learn. That night, he walked her home again. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of wet concrete and jasmine. They spoke little, the quiet between them gentler this time. When they reached her building, he said softly, "You were right. I've spent my whole life translating money into meaning. And I think I forgot the meaning part." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then start over." He smiled faintly. "With you?" She didn't answer. But for the first time, she didn't turn away. The lights of the city shimmered around them, and somewhere between the noise of traffic and the hush of their breaths, something fragile began to heal. He was still a billionaire, she was still a waitress, but for that single moment, they were simply two people learning how to listen. And in that shared silence, a new language was born, one that neither power nor pride could ever translate. A full month passed since that night outside May's building. The city had moved on, but neither of them truly had. Adrian Lau had withdrawn from the public eye, citing health reasons. In reality, his empire was on the edge of a quiet storm. The Singapore merger he'd rushed through, half out of distraction, half out of guilt, was starting to collapse. Millions were at stake, and the board was panicking. Rumors spread like wildfire. Had the great Adrian Lau finally lost his touch? Inside the polished walls of Lau Global Headquarters, anxiety hummed like electricity. Adrian sat in the conference room, listening to a dozen executives argue over solutions. He wasn't really hearing them. The numbers blurred together, voices fading into static. The empire he had spent his life building was slipping through his fingers. And for the first time, he didn't care about money. He cared about something else, someone else. Marcus, his loyal assistant, leaned close. "Sir, you need to respond to the investors. They're demanding reassurance." Adrian's jaw tightened. What do they want to hear? That I can't sleep. That I've made a mistake. That everything I built might collapse because I stopped believing in it. Marcus hesitated. They want you to sound like the man you used to be. Adrian leaned back, staring at the skyline through the glass. Maybe that man doesn't exist anymore. The silence in the room deepened. Even Marcus didn't know how to respond. Everyone had seen the change in him, the softening, the distraction, the way his eyes no longer burned with the same ruthless certainty. They all blamed her, the mysterious woman who'd stepped out of nowhere and rewired their leader's entire perspective. When the meeting ended, Adrian walked out wordlessly, loosening his tie. Outside, the city glowed beneath a stormy dusk. He drove aimlessly through the streets, past the skyscrapers and neon signs, until he found himself parked across from the diner again. It was closed now, its windows dark. A flicker of neon reflected against the rain-slick glass, like a memory that refused to fade. He thought of Mei Lin's words, "You're fluent in success, Adrian, but not in peace." He didn't know what peace looked like, but he knew he wanted to find it, with her. Meanwhile, Mei Lin had been living quietly, working less, studying more. The media frenzy had finally died down, but whispers followed her everywhere. Some people called her lucky, others opportunistic. She ignored them all. What mattered was her brother, Wei. His health had declined, medical bills piled up again. She had taken extra translation work, often late into the night. She hadn't seen Adrian since that day in the lecture hall. Part of her missed him, another part feared what his presence always brought, chaos disguised as care. One rainy afternoon, she sat by Wei's bedside, translating a medical document. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something in her chest already knew. Mei Lin, Adrian's voice came through, low and strained. "I need to see you." Her throat tightened. "Adrian, it's been a month." "I know. And I've ruined everything." "What happened?" "My company, the merger I pushed through, it's falling apart. I ignored everyone's warnings. I thought I could fix it alone. But now thousands of jobs are on the line." She was quiet for a long moment. "You want me to help?" "No," he said softly. "I just needed to hear your voice." Her breath caught. "Adrian, I can't be your peace and your problem at the same time." "I know," he whispered. "But you're the only person who makes the noise stop." The line went quiet. Then she said gently, "If you really want to change, don't run from your mistakes. Translate them." He frowned. "Translate? Turn them into meaning. Otherwise, you'll never understand yourself." The next morning, Adrian did something no one expected. He called a press conference. The world gathered, anticipating another arrogant justification from the billionaire who never admitted defeat. Instead, he stood at the podium, pale but composed, and said words that stunned everyone. "I made a mistake. A costly one. The Singapore merger was my fault. I was blinded by ambition, and by distraction. But I've learned that building without listening is just noise dressed as progress." The cameras flashed. The crowd murmured. For a moment, Adrian looked directly into the lenses, as if speaking not to shareholders, but to one person watching somewhere far away. "From today," he continued, "Lao Global will restructure. We'll focus on people, not just profit. And I'll be taking a temporary leave to rebuild what I broke." The announcement sent shockwaves through the business world. Stocks dipped, then stabilized. Commentators called it madness, others called it honesty. For the first time, Adrian Lau had become human in the eyes of millions. But to him, only one opinion mattered. That night, Mei Lin watched the broadcast replay on her phone. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, pride, worry, disbelief. This wasn't the Adrian she met months ago. That man would have blamed someone else. This one took the fall himself. Maybe he was learning. Wei stirred awake beside her. "Is that the same guy who sent the blank check?" She smiled faintly. "Yes. He looks different. He is different. Do you still like him? She hesitated. I don't know. I think. I understand him. Wei grinned sleepily. Understanding is just love without the word. She brushed his hair back gently, but said nothing. 2 weeks later, Adrian disappeared from the media again. Rumors swirled that he had left New York entirely. May tried not to care. But one evening, as she left class, she found a note tucked into her textbook. No signature, just a location, Pier 12, 9 p.m. She almost didn't go. But curiosity, and something deeper, pulled her there. The pier was quiet under the moonlight, waves lapping softly against the wooden posts. Adrian stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, looking out over the water. When he turned, his eyes looked tired but alive. You came, he said. I almost didn't. I would have deserved that. She folded her arms. What is this, Adrian? Another apology? No, he said. A beginning. He gestured toward the docked ship behind him, a cargo vessel newly repainted. I'm starting a new branch of Lao Global. Humanitarian transport. Medical supplies, education shipments, refugee relocation support. I want to use what I built to fix what I broke. She blinked. You're turning your empire into a charity? He smiled faintly. Into a purpose. She stared at him, unsure whether to believe it. Why tell me? Because I want you to lead it. She froze. What? You're the only person I trust to build bridges between people who don't speak the same language. You don't just translate words, you translate humanity. She shook her head. I can't. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. Her heart raced. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. And I'm offering you the chance to build something bigger. She turned away, the wind whipping her hair. I can't be your redemption, Adrian. He stepped closer. You're not. You're my compass. The honesty in his tone broke her defenses. She looked at him then, not as a billionaire, but as a man stripped bare. If I say yes, she whispered, it won't be for you. It'll be for what's right. He nodded. That's exactly why I need you. The next morning, she walked into Lao Global headquarters for the first time as more than a waitress. The lobby buzzed with curiosity. Some whispered, some stared, but Mei Lin ignored them all. She was there for one reason, to build something that mattered. Adrian met her at the elevator, dressed simply, his usual armor of arrogance replaced by humility. Welcome aboard, he said softly. She smiled faintly. Don't make me regret it. He grinned. I'll try not to. They began working side by side, building the framework for the new division. Weeks passed in quiet intensity, late nights, long meetings, shared coffees that turned into conversations about everything and nothing. They argued sometimes, she about ethics, he about logistics, but always ended up laughing. Something unspoken grew between them, not fragile anymore, but solid. One night, as they reviewed documents in his office, the city lights painting golden lines across the glass, Adrian looked up and said softly, You know, I used to think fluency was about mastering words. But you've taught me it's about understanding silence. She smiled. And you've learned fast. He held her gaze. Not fast enough. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was full, alive. Something passed between them, quiet and certain. A month later, the first humanitarian shipment launched. News outlets covered it worldwide. The headlines read, Adrian Lau rebuilds empire with purpose. But to May, the real story wasn't about ships or money. It was about a man who had finally learned to listen. That evening, they stood together on the pier, watching the vessel disappear into the horizon. The sun melted into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. You did it, she said. He shook his head. We did. She turned to him. You changed more than your company, Adrian. You changed your language. He smiled. You taught me how. For a long moment, neither spoke. The waves crashed gently against the dock, carrying away the noise of everything that had come before. Finally, he said softly, You know, I once thought falling in love meant losing control. But with you, it feels like finding translation for something I never understood. Her eyes softened. And what's that? Home. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth she had been afraid to name. Somewhere between the chaos of his world and the stillness of hers, they had built a language only they could speak. She stepped closer. Then maybe it's time you stop translating and start living it. He smiled. With you? She didn't answer in words. Instead, she reached out, her hand finding his. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was real. As the last light of the day faded, they stood side by side, two souls who had walked through noise and silence, power and pain, and found meaning not in what they said, but in what they finally understood. And though the world would keep spinning, their story had already found its language, love, spoken fluently at last. The weeks that followed the humanitarian project's launch marked a golden chapter in both Adrian Lau's empire and his life. For the first time in years, the headlines spoke not of scandal or greed, but of purpose, compassion, and transformation. Investors who once doubted him now called him visionary. Employees spoke of pride, of being part of something bigger than profit. The world applauded the billionaire who had found his heart again. But beneath the applause, Adrian felt the tremors of unease, because he knew the world's approval was fleeting. It always was. What mattered wasn't the praise outside, it was the peace within. And while he had learned to listen, he was still learning to stay still. One late evening, he stood at the window of his office, looking down at the city lights that shimmered like broken glass. Mei Lin sat across from him, reviewing shipment reports and language training proposals for their expanding network. She looked peaceful in her concentration, hair tied loosely, sleeves rolled up, her pen gliding over the paper with quiet precision. He found himself watching her more than the reports. "You've changed everything, you know," he said finally. She didn't look up. "No. You changed yourself. I just reminded you that you could." He smiled faintly. "You always downplay your role. Because people like you love giving credit like gifts, it makes you feel in control." He chuckled. "Still brutally honest." She looked up then, her gaze softening. "Still easily distracted." Their eyes held for a moment that felt longer than it was. She was the stillness he'd been chasing all his life, the translation of every emotion he'd never understood. But even stillness can tremble under pressure. "Adrian," she said suddenly, "you know this can't last forever." He frowned. "What can't?" "This balance. Between our worlds. Between who you are and what I am." He leaned forward. "You think I care about that?" "You should," she said softly. "Because the world does." He sighed. "Let them talk. I'm done living by other people's definitions." But even as he said it, a shadow flickered across his face. Because part of him knew she was right. The higher he rose, the less the world allowed him to love freely. The next day, the first storm hit. Marcus burst into his office with a grim expression. "We have a problem. The humanitarian division, someone leaked internal documents. The press is claiming misuse of funds." Adrian stood. "That's impossible. Every expense was approved." Marcus handed him a tablet. "They have receipts. False ones. Someone planted them. The story's going viral." Adrian's chest tightened. "Who would do this?" Marcus hesitated. "The board thinks. Mei Lin." He froze. "What?" "They claim she had access to the financial transfers. The fake documents were uploaded from her login credentials." "That's absurd." "I know. But the press doesn't." Adrian's phone buzzed, reporters, shareholders, PR calls flooding in. His reputation, already fragile from his public confession weeks ago, was cracking again. He stormed out of the room. "Where is she?" "Still at her desk," Marcus said quietly. When Adrian reached the humanitarian division's floor, employees fell silent. May was there, standing by her computer, calm amid the whispers. She looked up as he approached. "Tell me it's not true," he said. Her brows furrowed. "What's not true?" "That you leaked the documents." Her face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "I didn't." You know I didn't. I do, he said quickly. But they won't. I need to know how this happened. I don't know. Maybe someone used my access. Or hacked it. The elevator doors opened then, and two corporate investigators stepped out. Miss Lin, one said, we need you to come with us for questioning. Adrian moved between them instantly. No one questions her without my approval. Sir, the board has requested a full internal review. He looked at May, torn. She shook her head. Let them. If I fight it, they'll say I'm hiding something. His voice dropped. You're not alone in this. I know, she said quietly. But sometimes, standing alone is the only way to stay clean. The next 48 hours were chaos. News outlets ran with the story, Lao Global's linguist caught in financial leak. The photos of her from the gala resurfaced, headlines twisting the narrative into scandal. Adrian refused to comment publicly, defending her privately to every board member. But pressure mounted. Investors threatened to pull funding. The humanitarian project stalled. One night, Adrian found her sitting on the rooftop of the headquarters, the wind whipping through her hair. She looked small against the skyline. You should have called me, he said, approaching. I didn't want you to fight my battles. They're not just yours. She turned, eyes weary. Do you know what the press is saying? That I manipulated you. That I used you to rebuild your image. They've even made up stories about my past. He clenched his fists. I'll crush them all. She shook her head. No. You'll only prove them right. Then what do you want me to do? Watch them destroy you. She looked out over the city. Sometimes, the only way to clear a lie is to let the truth breathe on its own. He exhaled, defeated. You're asking me to be patient while they tear us apart. I'm asking you to trust me. Their eyes met again, and he saw something fierce in her calm. For all her quiet, she had a strength that rivaled his power. I do trust you, he said finally. Then prove it, she whispered. Don't save me. Believe me. The next morning, she was gone. Her office, empty. Her apartment, cleared out. No note. No message. Adrian searched every corner of the city, every connection, but it was as if she'd vanished into thin air. Marcus approached cautiously that evening. Sir, she withdrew from the university too. No record of travel, no forwarding address. Adrian stared out the window, the skyline blurring through unshed tears. She said she wanted peace, he murmured. Maybe this is what she meant. He turned back to Marcus, voice low but sharp. Find out who framed her. I don't care what it takes. Weeks passed. The scandal began to fade, replaced by newer stories. But Adrian didn't rest. He worked nights, personally reviewing every transaction, every digital trace. Finally, the truth emerged. One of his senior executives, Chen Wei, an old rival who'd resented May's influence, had fabricated the evidence. He'd forged login credentials and rerouted funds to a shell company, using her as a scapegoat. Adrian summoned him to the top floor. You destroyed an innocent woman, Adrian said coldly. Chen smirked. You destroyed yourself the day you let her in. You went soft. You forgot what this world really is. Adrian's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Maybe. But I remember what integrity looks like, and you'll never see it again. He fired him on the spot, ordered legal charges, and called a press conference the same day. The allegations against Miss Mei Lin were false, he said before the cameras. She was betrayed by corruption within my company. She acted with honor. And if she's listening, May, I owe you my deepest apology. The clip went viral overnight. Millions watched. But May didn't appear. 2 months later, Adrian received a small package at his office. No return address. Inside was a postcard, from Kyoto. The handwriting was unmistakable. I saw the press conference. Thank you for believing me. Sometimes the only way to hear yourself is to leave the noise. Don't look for me. Just keep building bridges. M. He read it a dozen times, his heart heavy but warm. She was alive. Safe. Free. It should have been enough, but he knew it wasn't. He needed to see her again. In the months that followed, Lao Global transformed under his new leadership. The humanitarian division flourished, expanding into disaster relief and education outreach. Adrian kept her vision alive in every decision, every speech. He'd built empires before, but this one carried her fingerprints. One spring morning, Marcus entered the office with a faint smile. "Sir, you should see this." He handed Adrian a report, an international language summit invitation, hosted in Tokyo. Keynote speaker, Professor Mei Lin, Director of Global Linguistics Institute. Adrian froze. "She's in Tokyo?" "Yes. And it seems she's rebuilt something extraordinary." He didn't hesitate. "Book a flight." When he arrived in Tokyo, the conference hall buzzed with intellectuals, linguists, and educators. Adrian sat quietly in the back, watching the stage. Then she walked out, graceful, confident, transformed. Gone was the shy waitress. In her place stood a woman who commanded attention without demanding it. Her hair was shorter now, her voice steady as she spoke. "Language," she said, "isn't just communication. It's empathy in motion. It's how we build bridges when words fail. And sometimes, it's how we forgive." Adrian's chest tightened. Every word carried weight, not just for the audience, but for him. When the session ended, she lingered near the stage, speaking to attendees. Then her eyes found him. For a moment, neither moved. The noise around them dimmed, replaced by the thunder of recognition. Finally, she approached. "You came," she said softly. "I promised I'd listen," he replied. Her lips curved faintly. "I heard your apology. Too late. Maybe just in time." They stepped outside together, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the plaza. Cherry blossoms floated in the wind, soft as forgiveness. "You've built something beautiful here," he said. "So did you," she replied. "You kept your word." He smiled. "I learn from the best." She looked at him for a long moment. "You never stopped believing in me." "I couldn't," he said simply. "You were the one truth in all the noise." The wind swept between them, carrying petals like whispers. "So what now?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "Now we start again. Not as billionaire and waitress. Just as people trying to speak the same language." She studied him, searching his eyes, then smiled softly. "Then say something worth hearing." He stepped closer, voice low. "I missed you." Her expression softened. "That's a good start." They stood there, the world bustling around them, and for the first time, neither of them needed translation. That night, they walked through the narrow streets of Kyoto, past paper lanterns glowing in the dark. Mei spoke of her work, how she taught language to children displaced by war, how she'd finally found her purpose. Adrian listened, truly listened, his eyes filled with pride. When they reached the bridge overlooking the river, he turned to her. "Do you ever regret leaving?" She smiled gently. "No. Because leaving helped both of us find the words we were missing." "And what were those?" "Forgive. Begin. Love." He took her hand slowly, the same way he had once taken her advice, carefully, with reverence. "Then let's start speaking them." The lanterns reflected in the water like stars reborn, and as they stood there, two souls who had traveled through pride, pain, silence, and distance, they finally understood that love, like language, is not mastered through perfection but through translation, patience, and faith. For the first time, Adrian Lau was fluent in peace. And Mei Lin, the shy waitress who once corrected a billionaire in a crowded room, had taught him the only sentence that ever mattered: understanding is another word for love. The night air of Kyoto was alive with music and scent, the faint trace of cherry blossoms, incense from nearby shrines, and the warm laughter of people spilling out of lantern-lit teahouses. It was a city built on memory and silence, where the past walked beside you like a shadow. Adrian Lau felt that deeply as he followed Mei Lin through the narrow alleys. Her steps were light but sure, her calm presence pulling him forward as though she had always known the way. They crossed the Kumo River Bridge, where paper lanterns floated like drifting prayers. For a while, they said nothing. The world didn't need words between them anymore. Every glance, every breath felt fluent in meaning. Yet there was one truth Adrian had not spoken, not in Tokyo, not in the months of distance, not even when he'd found her again. He stopped walking. "May," he said softly. She turned, her hair swaying with the evening breeze. "Yes." He hesitated. For the first time in years, words felt too small for what he carried. "When I lost everything, my company, my name, my sense of direction, I realized the only thing I couldn't bear losing was you. You taught me how to listen, how to build something that mattered. And now I can't imagine a world where I don't wake up wanting to hear your voice." Her eyes shimmered in the lamplight, but her tone was steady. "You don't have to say that, Adrian." "I'm not saying it because I have to," he said. "I'm saying it because I finally understand it." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Do you know what love sounds like in every language?" He shook his head. "It sounds the same. But it means something different every time. It's not the word that matters, it's the translation." He stepped closer. "Then translate this for me," he whispered. "Because I think I've been saying it since the first night I met you." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe I've been understanding it just as long." The days that followed felt like borrowed time. They spent mornings walking through bamboo forests and afternoons in small cafes where the air smelled of roasted tea and hope. May introduced him to her students at the Global Linguistics Institute, bright-eyed children who came from every corner of Asia, learning not just words but connection. Adrian sat in the back of her classroom, humbled by how effortlessly she bridged worlds. It wasn't power. It wasn't prestige. It was presence. After class, one of the little girls tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Lau," she said shyly. "Yes. Teacher May says you used to be very rich." He smiled. "Used to be." "She said you gave your money to help people." "Well," he said thoughtfully, "maybe I just realized that wealth doesn't mean much if it doesn't speak the same language as kindness." The girl grinned, then whispered, "I think you love her." He laughed quietly. "You're very observant." "She loves you too," the child said confidently before running off. May, overhearing, shook her head with amusement. "She's not wrong," Adrian murmured as they walked out together. May gave him a sidelong glance. "You're quoting children now?" "When they're right, yes. But even peace comes with its own storms." As word spread about Adrian's presence in Kyoto, journalists began circling again. The media had forgiven his past but hadn't forgotten it. They called him the redeemed tycoon and her the woman who changed a billionaire's heart. Some called it beautiful. Others called it calculated. The noise returned like an echo he couldn't silence. One evening, as they sat together on her small apartment balcony, May looked at the growing stack of unopened letters and requests for interviews. "You can't escape it forever," she said quietly. "I don't care what they say anymore." "But I do," she said gently. "Not for myself, for the message. You built something good. Don't let their curiosity poison it." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Every time I think I've learned peace, the world demands proof." "That's because you're still living by its language," she said. "Maybe it's time to write your own." He looked at her, the simplicity of her wisdom cutting through the noise. "Then will you help me write it?" She smiled softly. "I already have." Weeks turned into months. Together, they launched the Bridge Project, a collaboration between Lao Global and the Linguistics Institute to create global education centers that taught language as empathy. Each center bore an inscription May wrote herself: "To understand is to love." The project grew faster than either of them imagined, 30 countries within a year, millions of children connected through the power of communication. The world praised Adrian again, but this time, he didn't care about the spotlight. He let May lead the interviews, her calm eloquence transforming every conversation into a lesson in grace. At a gala in Singapore celebrating their work, a journalist asked her, "What's it like turning a billionaire into a humanitarian?" She smiled politely. "I didn't turn him into anything. He was always human. He just forgot." The room fell silent. Adrian watched from the side, his chest tight with emotion. He realized then that she had never wanted his world, she wanted to make it kinder. And she had. Later that night, as they stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the glittering harbor, he said softly, "You know, the old me would have bought a headline like that. I used to think stories were just tools to control people. But now I understand stories are how we remember to be human. She looked at him with quiet affection. That's why yours isn't over yet. He smiled faintly. Then write the ending with me. I will, she said. But not an ending. A continuation. One morning, they visited the dockyard where the first humanitarian ship had launched months ago. The air smelled of salt and diesel, the sea shimmering under the early sun. Workers stopped to greet them, smiling proudly. The ship was being renamed the Mei Lin, a surprise Adrian had arranged. When she saw the name, she turned to him in shock. You didn't. He smiled. I did. You said words matter. I wanted the world to remember yours. Her eyes glistened. I don't need my name on things, Adrian. I know. But I needed it there. To remind me that everything meaningful I built started with you. She placed a hand on his chest. Then promise me something. Anything. Never build something to honor me. Build it because you believe in it. He nodded slowly. I do. Because believing in you taught me how. That evening, they returned to the city and walked through the crowded night markets hand in hand. Street performers played soft music, vendors called out their wares, and somewhere amid the hum of life, Adrian felt truly anonymous, and free. He bought them skewers of grilled yakitori, laughing when she scolded him for dripping sauce on his shirt. You're impossible, she said, shaking her head. And you love me anyway. Maybe, she teased. A little. They strolled by the riverbank afterward, where reflections of neon lights rippled across the water. Adrian stopped suddenly. Do you remember that night in New York? When you corrected my translation? She smiled. Of course. You were furious. And fascinated, he said. You didn't just translate my words, you saved my future. That moment changed everything. She looked up at him. And what does it mean now? He reached for her hand. It means I finally understand that every language begins with listening. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Then you're fluent now. He smiled. Only because I had the best teacher. But fate, as it often does, had one more test to give. A sudden typhoon struck the Philippine coast, devastating a region where their bridge project had just opened a new center. Thousands were stranded. The government requested emergency aid. Without hesitation, Adrian mobilized the Lao Global Fleet. His ships became rescue vessels, carrying food, medicine, and volunteers. He insisted on going himself, against his board's advice. You don't have to prove anything, May told him, worry clouding her face. This isn't about proving, he said. It's about showing that what we built isn't just words. Then I'm going with you. He started to protest, but her eyes silenced him. You're not the only one who believes in this, she said. We go together. The journey was grueling. Rain hammered the ship's deck as waves rose like dark mountains. The storm raged for hours, the crew battling to stay upright. Adrian stood at the helm, soaked but determined. May worked with the volunteers, translating radio distress calls from local islands, her calm voice cutting through panic. At dawn, they reached the coast. Villages lay in ruins, families huddled under makeshift shelters. Without waiting for cameras or orders, Adrian joined the rescue efforts, hauling supplies, lifting debris, comforting survivors. May organized language stations, ensuring no one's plea went unheard. Together, they became the living embodiment of their mission. When night fell, they sat on the beach beside a fire, exhausted but alive. Children played nearby, laughing despite everything. May watched them, her face illuminated by the flames. You see, she whispered. Even after disaster, people find their voice again. Adrian nodded, his gaze tender. And you're the reason they can. She shook her head. No. You are. You gave them the ships. He smiled faintly. And you gave me the reason to sail them. When they returned home weeks later, the world hailed them as heroes. But the true victory was quiet, the laughter of the children they'd saved, the letters written in every language thanking them for hope. May and Adrian stood together at the reopening of the rebuilt Bridge Center, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by their work. During the ceremony, a young boy stepped forward holding a small handmade plaque. On it was carved a single phrase in 12 different languages: "To love is to understand." He handed it to May with both hands. She looked down at it, tears welling in her eyes, then turned to Adrian. "I think they've learned our lesson," she said softly. He smiled. "Then maybe it's time we learn theirs." That evening, back in Kyoto, they sat again on the same bridge where everything had begun. The city glowed around them, and the air was filled with the scent of rain. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a simple silver ring engraved with tiny symbols in 7 languages. "What's this?" she asked. He held it out to her. "A translation," he said. "Each word means the same thing in a different tongue, always." She looked at him in astonishment. "Adrian. I don't need ceremonies or headlines. I just want you to know that for the rest of my life, you'll be my language. The one I'll keep learning, every day." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to say forever." He smiled gently. "I don't have to. I already mean it." She took the ring, slipping it onto her finger, her hands trembling slightly. "Then I'll keep translating you," she whispered. "Even when words fail." He drew her close, their foreheads touching, and the city fell away. There was no applause, no audience, just the quiet sound of 2 people finally fluent in everything that mattered. Years later, the bridge project had become a global network spanning continents. Schools bore both their names now, though May had protested it every time. Children from war zones, refugee camps, and slums learned not just how to speak, but how to listen. And somewhere in every classroom, a photograph hung on the wall, Adrian and May standing together on that first dock, smiling into the sunrise. Adrian still traveled often, but now it was different. Every journey had purpose. Every success had meaning. And every night, no matter where he was, he called May, sometimes to discuss logistics, sometimes just to hear her say goodnight in a different language. It became their ritual, their anchor. One evening, years into their marriage, he asked her, "Do you ever miss the old days? When you were just a waitress, and I was a stranger in a restaurant?" She laughed softly. "Sometimes. Because in that moment, neither of us knew how much we needed each other." He nodded. "It's funny. I built empires, but the only thing that ever felt infinite was one conversation with you." She smiled, leaning against him. "Then keep talking." He looked out at the city lights, thinking about how far they'd come, from misunderstanding to meaning, from noise to silence, from power to peace. "You know what the best translation I ever made was?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "What?" He turned to her, eyes soft. "Turning loneliness into love." She laughed quietly, resting her hand on his. "Then you finally speak my language." The world outside continued its restless hum, but inside their small apartment, time slowed. The same rain that had fallen years ago in New York now whispered against their Kyoto window, reminding them that stories never truly end, they just find new languages to tell themselves in. And as Adrian pulled her closer, the city lights reflected in her eyes, he realized that the greatest empire he had ever built wasn't made of steel or money. It was built of words, silence, and the woman who taught him that love, real love, doesn't need translation at all.